Hey folks, welcome back to the Q Shed Backyard Barbecue. Today we're doing homemade corned beef for St. Patrick's Day. Looking very forward to this cook. Appreciate you joining us. Okay, so the corned beef process started about 6 days ago when I made up a brine for it. And I'll put the recipe for the brine down in the description below. But pretty simple brine: salt, sugar, pickling spice, and of course the curing salt that's so important. So again, I'll put the measurements that I used down below, but I actually got the brining formula from Malcolm Reed of How to Barbecue Right fame. So what we did was start out with an 18-pound full packer brisket. And for those of you who don't know, a packer refers to the entire brisket, both the point and the flat together. Generally they are cooked whole. So I prefer to cook them, but for this I separated the point from the flat, and there are plenty of videos online about how to do that. It's a little tricky the first time, but just take your time and you'll be fine. I then trimmed both the point and the flat pretty aggressively. I didn't want a lot of outside fat on it. So again, these have been in the brine for really about 5.5 days, and I took them out of the brine this morning and rinsed them. I did not soak them overnight or anything as you would with maybe a corned beef from the store that you were going to smoke. We'll see how it turns out. I hope they don't end up being too salty because I did not soak them. I don't think they will. I think we'll be okay based on the ingredients of the brine I used. So when I rinsed them this morning, they had turned a grayish color, and all I did was put Worcestershire sauce on them for a binder after I'd patted them nice and dry, and applied coarse ground black pepper to it. Not fresh cracked, just store-bought coarse ground black pepper, and I applied it, as you can see, pretty heavily to give it a nice peppery bark or crust, hopefully. This is going to be corned beef. Although corned beef typically is brined and cured and then boiled, this one is going to be smoked on my Weber Smokey Mountain 22. I don't know how long it'll take exactly with the point and flat separated. I'm guessing it'll take somewhere around 8 hours total. We'll see. Next, we're going to get the pit up to temp, and we'll see outside. Okay, so here's a quick look at the setup we'll be using for today's corned beef cook. We've got the Weber Smokey Mountain 22, and I'm running with the Beast basket and Minion basket, both from Greg at the Woodshed Smoke and Barbecue. I've got probably 25 to 30 pounds of Kingsford briquettes in there. Pulled out a few of those to load the small chimney of coals. So I also have 5 small chunks of pecan wood in there, which is one of my favorite, probably my favorite all-around wood to use. And I'll throw another couple small chunks on the coals just before I put the meat on as well, but that ought to give us plenty of smoke for this corned beef. Okay, so I wanted to show you a little more about the setup of the Weber Smokey Mountain 22 that we'll be using today. Down in the bottom you can see we have the 19-inch wide, 1/4-inch thick steel that I use as a diverter plate instead of the water pan that the Smoky Mountain comes with. Again, I did a video on all the mods and the reasons for them, but the reason behind this particular mod is that the bottom of the water pan gets down awfully close to the coals themselves, and the steel diverter plate here gives me a space between the coals and the diverter. It works really well at evening out the heat. So it's just carbon steel, and I spray it down with a thin coat of canola oil before each cook. On top of the 1/4-inch steel, I use this 19-inch pizza pan, which serves as a great drip pan. Instead of the factory middle and top grate setup, I actually use 2 factory top grates. The top grate is just a little wider than the bottom grate, and that allows me to use the 4 bolts from the rack supports to support the grate, which gives me about an extra 1.5 inches up off of the drip pan, which means I can more easily use that rack to smoke on with plenty of airflow underneath the meat. So I really like this setup. Then of course we've got the standard top grate in addition, and the top section is now put together. Okay, so now we'll get the small chimney of lit coals dumped into the minion basket here. Be sure to wear a glove when you're doing this. But all you need to do now is lift the minion basket out. You're left with a nice little pile of lit coals in the middle that will cause the rest of that charcoal to light slowly and give us a nice long burn time. Now we need to get the cooker put back together and let it come up to temp. So I've got everything closed up and put back together, and I've got all three of the bottom vents wide open on the Weber Smokey Mountain 22, and the top vent of course is wide open as well. It's typical for this cooker or any charcoal cooker to smoke heavily when you initially dump the lit coals onto the cold charcoal. Okay, so it's been about exactly 1 hour since I dumped the lit coals into the cooker, and over that time we're up to temp easily. We're up to temp after about 30 minutes, and as you can see, the smoke is cut down somewhat. About another 15 or 20 minutes in my experience it'll be cut down significantly more, but it's fine to put the meat on now. Temp wise, our fireboard 2, hope you can see that, is showing the top rack at about 295, the bottom rack at about 300 degrees, and then the dome temp is showing right at 250 degrees. Okay, so we're going to open it up and get the meat on. Okay, I want to get the cooker closed back up as quickly as possible, but as you can see here, I've got the flat on the bottom rack and the point on the top rack, and I've got ambient probes in both the top and bottom rack as well that we're tracking on the fireboard 2 drive. Okay, so just a quick update. It's been about an hour since I put the meat on, and about 2 hours since I first dumped the lit coals, and I just wanted to give you an idea of the level of clean heat that the Weber Smokey Mountain creates once all of that cold charcoal sort of starts to warm up and a little bit of it becomes lit. You can see there's virtually no smoke at this point. It'll still impart plenty of smoke flavor, but you're certainly not getting any of that ugly billowy smoke that's going to put an off taste on the meat. In terms of temps, we are at, let's see there, about 285 on the top rack, about 270 on the bottom, and the gauge on the dome is reading 260, so about a 25-degree swing between the dome temp and the top rack. I have all three bottom vents checked back to about 1/4 open, and the top vent is wide open, which is how I like to run it. Okay, so we're 3 hours into this corned beef cook, so I'm going to open up the cooker now and take a look. I'm going to also insert probes into both the brisket point and the flat so that I can monitor the temp from here on out. So here's the setup. I've got probes in both the flat down on the bottom rack and the point up here, and I've got a couple little chef treats that were trimmings that I just put on back there. So get this temp probe back in here. There we go. All right, so we're going to close it up and let her cook. We can see the internal temps of the point is 153 and the flat right at 160 at this point. Both the top and bottom grate ambient temps are right at 280, so we've come back up to temp after putting the probes in. Okay, so we're 5 hours into this cook now, and it is to the point that I want to get the briskets wrapped, or rather the corned beef wrapped. You can see here
The temps are still right at 270 ambient temp on both racks. There we go. And the point is at 175 internal. The flat is at 188. So there really wasn't much of a stall. So let's get it opened up and start getting them wrapped. So the wrapping process is really simple. There's not much to it. Just go ahead and get an appropriate size piece of paper. Started. Try to keep it fairly tight all the way through. This is the point, which I may not have made clear. Okay, just like that. We'll set it back in. We'll get the flat wrapped up and finish them off. Okay, so we're right at 7 hours in total cook time, and I just pulled both the flat and the point, and as you can see, there's nice dark color, nice crust from the pepper rub. Smells fantastic. It's got that super rich corned beef smell. So I'm going to rewrap them now. I've let them vent for about 5 or 10 minutes here and cool just a bit. I'm going to rewrap them and put them in a dry cooler for probably an hour and a half, and then we will cut them and eat. Okay, so the corned beef was about 7 hours on the cooker, and then it rested for about an hour and a half in a dry cooler, still wrapped in the pink butcher paper, and now we're going to unwrap it and see what we ended up with. All right, so it's time to cut into the corned beef and see how it turned out. This is the flat section. As I mentioned before, I separated the flat from the point, pre-cook and pre-brine. So it's important you cut directly across the grain. You can see here how the grain is running this direction. So we're going to turn it and go 90 degrees across the grain. It's definitely tender, and my knife is not as sharp as it should be. Slices are better coming in the middle here. We're going to take a look at this slice here from the middle. You get a look at how that beautiful red color goes all the way through. That's the brine from the corning process of the beef, which is again about a 5.5 day brining process, and it smells wonderful. So we're going to try a taste of the flat end here. This is a nice barky, peppery piece. So the first thing I was wondering is, will it be overly salty? Because corned beef can be that way. If you buy it from the store and you're going to put it on the smoker, you really need to soak it overnight. This is not, in my opinion, it's not at all overly salty. And all I did was rinse out of the brine. I did not soak it. So now we're going to take a look at the point section, which again I separated from the flat, pre-cook and pre-brine. The point is, of course, the fattier portion of the brisket, and the grain runs in almost a completely opposite direction. I'm going to start by cutting the point right in half. So now all the slices from the point will be across the grain. So let's see what we got here. I'm going to save this and make a little miniature corned beef burn end section here. Cut it into squares instead of slices. But you can tell they're very moist, definitely more moist. The point more moist than the flat, which is typical. It has a lot more intramuscular fat. You would expect that. But again, you see the bright red color all the way through, which means the brine did its job. It brined long enough to soak all the way through the meat. So I'm going to have a little taste of the point now. Actually, I'm going to have a taste of one of the burn ends here. So this is the part I've been looking most forward to. This is my favorite part of the entire cow, which is the point section of a brisket. And this one has been soaked in corned beef brine for almost 6 days. So, and this is a basically a corned beef burn end. Let's see what we have. This is it. Wow, that's really good. Really, really good. So I really encourage everyone to give this a try. I was intimidated before I tried it, but the brining process really is simple. Again, I'll put the recipe for the brine in the description below, and everything else I've used in the description below. Definitely check out How to Barbecue Right, Malcolm Reed's terrific channel. That's where I got the brine recipe from, and give this a shot. Whether it's St. Patrick's Day or not, give this recipe a shot because it's definitely worth it. Thanks again for checking out the Q Shed Backyard Barbecue. Take care. And our Weber Smokey Mountain 22 is coming up to temp. We're almost ready to get it on.